Hello, and welcome to lesson 3.1 in Unit 3. And in this unit, we're going to be covering lists and tuples. And this very first lesson, 3.1, we're going to start looking at lists. And lists are collections of items that are stored inside of a variable. And so they can contain numbers, strings, or a combination of both. The items in the list should be related in some way, but there are no restrictions on what can be stored in that list. So during this lesson, we're going to develop an understanding of lists and how we can use them to organize data. So before we start, I am going to create a new file. Go up here, File, and then New File. And I want to make sure that I go File, Save, so that I have a saved version of this. And let's see if I can go to Documents, click my down arrow there, Python, nope, Computer Science Unit 1, there's my Unit 1. So in this case, because I already have a folder called Unit 1 and we are now in Unit 3, I'm going to create a new folder, Unit 3, and I could even put lists and tuples. That way I remember what this one is all about. And I could rename Unit 1 to variables, strings and numbers, and comments. But I'm going to leave this one like this. So I have Unit 3 selected now, and I'm going to save this as Miller dash lesson 3.1 lists. Excuse me. Save. And you can see now that this has been stored inside of Computer Science Unit 3, and it is saved as my last name and then lesson 3.1 lists. It's a Python file. So inside of our lesson here, I would suggest that as we go through these different things that you stop or pause this video, go into the idle, type in what is shown in the video or on the document here, and then make sure you run it so you understand how the code is being run and what happens during these practice sessions, these little examples that I'm giving, so that way when you do create the projects at the end, these 3 practice problems, that you will be able to do these very easily using the information that you've learned previously. So here is an example of a list, and this one also uses a loop, and we haven't looked at loops yet, but this is a quick introduction. You're going to get an introduction to loops, I believe, in lesson 3.3, and when we do those, that will help us go through every part of the list, like each item that is stored in the list. But the loops we use here are called for loops. There are also some other loops that are called while loops, and we'll look at those later too. So this one creates a list of 3 students, and you can see that the variable name is students, and so the students is the variable. It's going to be holding on to a group of items, and as we'll talk a little bit later, it's always important if you have a list of things that you make it plural. It makes it a little bit more easy to understand what is being stored in there, because if I just put student but I had 3 people in there, if you saw that, you would think that it is one person. But since this is a list of 3 students, we want to make sure that we have them in a plural variable. Not necessary, but it does help for when you're reading your code. So I have a list called students, and all lists start with a square bracket. The square bracket is located up on the keyboard next to the letter P. And inside of these, I have them marked off in single quotes. I could do double quotes, but I have them marked as single quotes with a comma in between each item. And then at the end, I just have another square bracket to close it out. So this tells the idle, it tells the interpreter that I am running a list and that these 3 items are being stored inside of this list called students. And when it gets to the end bracket, it says that's the end of this list. So now what we're going to do is we're going to run a for loop. And what this is going to do is look for each student in students. So this is looking for individual names inside of the variable students. So it takes this right here and it's looking for an individual name every single time. And then what it's going to do is it's going to print hello, and then it's going to concatenate the student's name, and it's going to use the title case, so the capital letter for the very first letter. So in Bernice, it's going to have a capital B. And then at the end, it's going to concatenate or join another part of the string that is the exclamation point. So altogether, the for loop just looks like this. It's 2 lines. For each student, for a student in students, it's going to print hello, the student's name capitalized with an exclamation point. So just as an example, I'm going to copy this before we get into some other things. And I'm going to say this is the intro example. And I'm going to paste students. And then I also need to come down here and I'm going to copy this. And you'll see, whoops, I just erased that. That's not good. There we are. So for student in students, print hello, the student name. And you'll see that my quotation marks did not copy very well. They never do. So I want to make sure I come back through here and change my quotation marks. And even the singles here, I need to make sure that I do. So now you see that the colored code is correct. I have students, which is a variable, equals these 3 names wrapped in square brackets. And then it says for each student in students, I'm going to print hello, the student name plus the capitalized using the title case, and then I'm going to have an exclamation point at the end. So I command S, or you can go File, Save, or if you try and run it without saving, it's going to ask you to do that as well. And it tells me I have an invalid character. Well, this is the debugging part of any code. So it does not like that right there. I had an extra quotation mark. I forgot to erase it. So now if I just try and run this, it's going to say, are you sure? Do you need to save it? I click OK. And it's going to say, hello, Bernice, hello, Aaron, hello, Cody. And you can see it has the capital letter at the top, or at the front of the name. So they did the title case, and it correctly added everything together. So now to get into this naming and defining a list, since lists are a collection of objects, it's good practice to give them the plural name. And if each item in your list is a car, then you're going to call the list cars. If it's a dog, you're going to call the list dogs. This gives you a very straightforward way of referring to the entire list and also to pull out a single item in the list. So you can, if you're looking in the list called dogs, you're going to look for an individual item called dog. In Python, square brackets designate the list, and to define the list, you have to give the name of the list, the equal sign, or the assignment character, and then the values that you want to include the list within square brackets. So this list of dogs, I'm going to copy this one. And I'm going to come over here to my Python idle. I can do triple quotes. And then here's my list of dogs. I have the correct, there's my dogs. I have 3 items in there. And I can save it. And so you can store any values in the list. It just helps if the items are related in some way. The reason I copied this is because I know I'm going to need it down here. So to access one item in a list, you want to use the identifier that is based on the position of that item in the list. And all lists in almost everything in computer science starts with a 0. It does not start with 1. So the position in the list is actually 1 less than the actual position. So Border Collie is the first item in the list, but it's 1 less than that. So the item location here is actually 0. It starts with 0, 1, 2. So it's one less than its position in the list. It's something that many people make a mistake on, and it's very funny how often that it happens. It even says, programmers even joke about how often they all make the off by 1 error. So don't feel bad when you do make this kind of an error. I've made it many times while programming, and I just wonder where the first item went or why I'm only getting 49 instead of 50 different things. And it's because I forgot to start at 0. And so understanding that and using that as it is, you can move forward very easily, and just try and remember. And if you forget, you'll figure it out pretty quick. But you want to try and remember that the very first item always starts with 0. So in this case, if I take a new variable dog and I want to make it equal to the very first item in dog, in the list dogs, I want to make sure that I'm looking for item number 0. So what this does, it has a variable, there's dogs 0. So this is dogs in the first position right there. And then I'm going to print that item, whatever this is. In this case, it's going to be Border Collie. I want to print that in title case. So when I use this, and I have dog equals dogs 0, which is the very first item, and then I'm going to print the dog in title case. When I save it and run this one, you'll see that this one says an expected end of file while parsing. Means I forgot to do a parenthesis. There we go. Save it. Run module. And you'll see that it has Border Collie and its title case for both words. And also down here, you can see that I forgot to copy that extra parenthesis at the end. So if I wanted to look at the second item, I would actually have to use the number 1, which is going to be the Australian cattle dog. When I hit save and run, it pulls that up correctly. So the number in the parentheses is called the index of the item right here. Because the list starts at 0, the index of the item is always 1 less than the position. So to get the second item in the list, we need to use an index of 1. And when I do that, it's going to pull up the Australian cattle dog. To access the last items in the list, if I had a humongous list and I want to see what the very last item was, I use a different way of doing this, and I go negative, and I use a -1. This will pull up the very last item on the list. So in this case, because I have Labrador Retriever as my last item, if I do a -1, hit save, and then run this, it'll pull Labrador Retriever. So the -1 does the very last item in that list. And so I can continue to do this. -2 is going to pull the second to last item. Command S to save, run the module. It's going to pull up the Australian cattle dog. I'm going to do the third to last, which should pull up the very first item. And then the last one, if I try and do one more, -4, there's nothing that goes before that. So when I hit save and I run this one, it's going to come up with a syntax error. And it says that it was not able to find that item because the list index is out of range. So it will not find anything larger than the length of the list. So whatever the list length is, it cannot find anything longer than that. So even if I tried to search for dogs 4, which would be the 5th item on the list, save it, and then I try and run this module, it's going to do the same kind of an error because the index is out of range. It does not have an item that's in the 5th position. It doesn't even have an item that's in the 4th position. So it will not be able to find that part. So in the practice section, what we're looking at is creating 3 different problems. They're very similar to items that we created up above. The first one is to create a new list that has 5 items in it. And you're going to print each list item using the position in the list. And so for that, what we're going to be working on is creating, let me triple click all this stuff. Comment out. 2, 3. And for practice 1, there we go. I'm going to create a new list, and my new list is going to be called sports. Okay, and I'm going to create a list of strings, and I'm going to do cycling. Remember my quotation mark for the string. Running, swimming, curling, and ice hockey. Oops, gotta remember that. So there's my list, and now I'm going to print sports and when I save and run this, it says running. So I have my first one because I did, again, just to check, I made sure when I was trying to do the first one, remember that the list always starts as 0. So you can create a list here, print sports, that out of there, print sports 2, print sports 3, that gets number 4. Gotta remember to do my parentheses there too. And then finally print sports 4. And remember that we're always one less than our position in the list. And so this should print out all 5 items starting with 0, which is the very first one, all the way up to number 4, which should be the 5th item on the list. So when I save this and I hit run module, you should see all 5 of the list items printed out correctly. And I'm going to say this list of sports will print out each item in the list. Excuse me. I'm going to triple quotation mark that one out so I can do practice problem number 2. And this one is going to create a list, print each item in a sentence using the location of the list. So your statement could simply be, my favorite color is whatever value is in the list. So this one is going to be called a list, and use each item in a sentence. And so this is going to be called favorites equals, and square bracket, my favorite color is blue. My favorite number is 42. My favorite month is, let's say it's fall because it's fall right now, or autumn, I guess. I like ice cream. And what could be the last one? My favorite color of pen is blue, or black, because I've already used blue once. So there's my list. It has 5 items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm going to say print, make a string. So my favorite color is, and then I have to concatenate or join this together, and I'm going to say favorites 0. And when I finish that print statement, if I save it and then run this part of the program, my favorite color is blue, and I ought to probably put inside of this parenthesis join quotations a period. That way it is a proper sentence with a period at the end of it. So remember, when you do a string and you include a number, if I do my favorite number is plus VORITS 1 plus a period. If I try and run this, it is going to give me an error. And it says that it's traced back to line number 32, which I'll show you how to open those up. And it can only concatenate a string, not an interval. So you see that I'm using the same code as I had before, but this time I have a number in there. I need to make sure that I do a str with a parenthesis, and at the end of this I have another parenthesis. So I'm turning whatever number value this is into a string. I could do that around each of these, and it would automatically turn whatever is in this list item into a string, so I can use it in a string print statement. When I hit save and I run it, this time it should print out perfectly. So I just have to make sure that I'm turning this number into a string in order to concatenate or join it to the rest of this string right here. Now it had said that it was in line number 32 in the module, this program that I'm creating. There is an option up here underneath options that says show line numbers. So when I click on that, it's going to put an invisible to the program, so it doesn't actually read these as it's going through the program. It's not going to print out the line numbers here on the output part of it. But what it does is it lets you look at it and say, oh, the error is on line number 32. There is line 32, or there's line 28, or there's line 19. I just click on one of these numbers. It highlights that whole line. And then I can look down and say, oh, okay, I missed a comma. Or in this case, I did not have the str at the beginning of it. So that's that part. So now I'm going to push my triple quotation marks there, and I'm going to go on to practice problem number 3. And for this one, what we're doing is we're going to create a user account list that has the following items: a first name, a last name, a username, and a password. And you can make whatever information you would like. And this is going to print out sentence for the new user account. There we go. And so I'm going to say user, and we're going to do a new list with a square bracket, and we're going to have a first name, Bob Jones. His name is, or username is B Jones, and his password is going to be a super secure ASDF1234. So that way, that is Bob's information to get into whatever account this is. And so our user account statement would be something maybe we print out, say, hi Bob Jones, your information is whatever. So if I was going to do this, I would say print, and then a parenthesis, and I'd say hello use double quotes there. Favorites Nope, this is user. 0 dot title plus do some print or space in here, so I have a space between the first name and the last name, and user 1 dot title and then we're going to do a join. Oops, I forgot to put one right there, didn't I? Plus the exclamation point. Let's see what this looks like so far. Unexpected end of file. Whoop, I forgot my parenthesis at the end. There we go. Save, run module. Should say hello Bob Jones with an exclamation point. Print your new account has been created. Your user name is plus user 2 plus print your password is plus user, I think 3 for the last one. And I'm not going to use a period at the end of this one because sometimes if you use a period at the end of something that has a password, it might give the user the idea that they should use that period in there, and then they will not type out the correct one. So some experience gives me that information. But so when I hit save and I hit run, you should see invalid syntax. Fantastic. What did I do there? Oh, forgot the end of the print statement up above. Good debugging skills, looking at every single line. So this one should work. Hello, Bob Jones. Your new account has been created. Your username is bjones. Your password is ASDF1234. Cool. So that's that project. So those are the 3 practice problems for this assignment. And when you are creating this this project list, just like the other ones, make sure that you name it correctly. So it should use your last name, and then Python 3.1 lists is the assignment name for this project. Good luck, and let me know if you have questions.